Hello, and welcome to Lab Assignment CIT-05-L3 Splunk Deployment, part of the SEAM introduction. This lab is about learning about the Splunk installation process and how to gather log information from a Windows client. We're going to install Splunk Enterprise on Linux, connect and gather logs from a Windows operating system using the Splunk Universal Forwarder. This lab is estimated to take about 45 to 60 minutes. Our requirements is a basic understanding of Windows and Linux, knowledge of SEAM, and we're going to knowledge of the Splunk installation process. So what do we need? We need VirtualBox, which we have here. We need an Ubuntu Linux VM fresh install. I have that here. And we have a Windows 10 VM from a previous exercise. I have that here. And we need pfSense running over here. So I have all my tools and environments. And we also have some extra lab files that you can get, which is the Splunk Enterprise, as well as the Universal Forwarder. And all of these are in our lab document and or in the Canvas file system. And of course, our textbook has some additional information on that. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to go to lab task 1. I'm going to minimize the web interface and bring in my virtual manager box here. And the first thing we're going to work on is on Ubuntu. And the assumption here is that you have a fresh install of Ubuntu 20.04. And if you don't have that, please go through the video library and go through the tutorial that walks you through how to set that up. Okay, so I'm going to go into settings. And in the settings, it says on page 4, I dip down into step 3. I need to go to the networking section, and rather than have it on NAT, I need to have it on internal network, and we're going to select the Vuln Corp network, and under advanced, under promiscuous mode, we're going to have allow VMs, and the cable is connected. So that was step 3 of page 5. I scroll down, I click OK, and then that takes me to step 2, install Splunk Enterprise. The first thing is to make sure that the pfSense VM is running at the start of the Ubuntu VM, and I can verify that it is. Let's just take a look and show. I see my pfSense is running. This is great. I put it away, and then I'm going to fire up my Ubuntu machine. And while that's happening, I'm going to minimize VirtualBox and just give us some room with the Ubuntu box and bring that about over here. Okay, so now I'm back. I have my Ubuntu VM fired up. I have my user John. We're going to log in. And as Ubuntu is starting up, I'm just going to take a look at the lab here, click Activities. Okay, so the first thing, as we mentioned, we wanted to make sure VM is running and start the Ubuntu VM. It says my connection failed, so we're going to take a look at that in a moment. And click Activities and search for Terminal. So I'm going to go to Activities, and I'm going to type in Terminal, so I can get a command prompt or shell. And in this case, I'm going to type in IPA for the IP address, and I don't see the address that I'm looking for. So if I don't have the IP address, I'm going to have to configure this manually, if config. So I do not have the IP addresses that I'm looking for. So on step 4, page 7, it says click on the arrow in the upper right-hand corner. So we're going to click on the arrow icon. I'm actually going to go right into this here. So it's like a little networking interface, and it says go to wired settings. So I'm going to go into settings, and I get into this icon here, which is wired. I click on the gear icon, and I originally had this configured for IPv4 as a DHCP client. For some reason, it didn't work. So we're going to go over to manual, and we're going to statically assign an IP address. So we're going to go with the 10.0.0.3. The mask is going to be 255.0.0.0, and the gateway is going to be 10.0.0.1, and our DNS is going to be 10.0.0.1. Make sure all of this looks right, and it's manual. I click apply. So I'm all set there. And then it says in the download section of the site, so I'm going to my folders here, and in downloads, my file is empty. So I need to drag the following Splunk file to my Ubuntu's download directory. Now, in order to drag this, we need to have guest editions installed. I know that I do. I have devices from a previous exercise. It was a fresh install. I have bidirectional. I need to go to my folder, and let's go ahead into my downloads folder on my host machine. And I'm going to copy the Splunk file, Now I can just download this either from the Canvas site, or I can go to splunk.org and download this directly. Now with the 806, I ran into some trouble because I think of my Mac. So I went with the 8.1. It'll run exactly the same. Let me just copy it over. As you see, I can drag and drop. When I get the green plus sign, that means it's in the right place. Okay, great. So I have my Splunk file. I went with the 8.1 file. On the exercise files, it says 8.06. You can try either or, but for me, 8.1 went. I just downloaded the fresh copy from Splunk. Okay, so in the terminal command, I'm going to run terminal right here. So I can go into terminal. I'm going to right click on the desktop, open in terminal, and I'm just going to do an ls command to make sure that's copied properly. Then I'm going to unpack this or install it. So it's sudo, as you see here, ddpkg, unpack it, -i. I'm already in the downloads folder, so I just have to specify the file. And I have to obviously put in my credentials, and it'll unpack the file. Okay, it says complete. Splunk was unpacked. I'm just going to clear my screen here, minimize the folder, the downloads folder, because we don't need that anymore. And I'm going to go to page 10 where I actually run Splunk. So I'm going to sudo, because I have to start the command. I'm going to use some command line completion. So opt command line Splunk space tab bin directory tab Splunk start. And at that point, it takes me over to page 11, step 10, where I have to select the agreement. I can scroll down this whole thing here. I'm just going to make sure I have the VM selected. Just hit the letter Q to just quit the whole screen of text. It says, do I agree with the license? Yes, I do, as in step 10 says. It says, please enter an administrator name for Splunk. I'm going to type in admin. And it wants a password. And in this case here, we're going to put in a password that we will remember. Okay, Splunk likes it. And at this point here, I'm at step 12. It says it gives me an interface that I can take a look at. I can actually right click that and open the link and see what it looks like for a moment. We definitely will be coming back into this here. And then we also have to do some configurations while we're at it. So I'm going to get rid of this and stay on task. Okay, so I see my Splunk is installed. We'll come back and configure this a little bit later. We have some configuration items we have to fix before we go into this here. So let me give myself a little bit of room in the command line. I'm going to ignore, it says I'm low on disk space, I need a bigger VM. I'm going to clear the screen. And in this case here, it says that I need to make a configuration in a index conf file for the Splunk. So I'm going to copy this whole thing here. Right click, copy, and I'm going to paste it, and it's going to open up a conf file. And in that configuration file, I have to scroll down and find this line of text, frozen time periods. So I'm going to use the Control W to find. I'm going to assume frozen is somewhat unique, and I see the file that I'm looking for, the spec that I need to configure, which is frozen time periods. And I have this time number here, and just under index specific details, send it to 25. Okay, so I'm going to set this didn't want to do that. I'm going to set this to 25. $259,200. Okay, to write this file, I can just Control X and save this. It says, do I want to save it? It's yes. And I save it to that file. If I want to, I can go ahead and take a look at it again, where I Control W, look for frozen in the text file, and I see that I have saved this configuration. So this one here, I can just Control X out of it and clear my screen. So I completed step number 1 of page 12, and these are all the settings that we were looking at. Okay, so now it says go to Firefox, which we do here, and that's fine. And it says go into our local host. So I'm going to type in 127.0.0. Sorry if my VM is a little slow. It seems like I'm running low on space, but I think we can continue with this tutorial just to make sure everything is fine. So here in step 2, it says open Firefox and browse to the provided URL. I'm going to 127.0.0.1 port 8000. And that takes me into the Splunk interface. And this time here, it's my first time logging in. I'm going to type admin and the password we set up when we were configuring and installing Splunk. I do not want to show the password. I do not want to save it. That was page 14. And then Splunk will be loading into these new messages. Okay, so I'm back here. Let's get to our screen. Just make that a little bit bigger for us so that way we can see this here. And I have some questions that the screen is asking me here. So in step 3, in helping you message, we're just going to click got it. And in close the important changes window, we're going to scroll over a little bit. We didn't have that window here. We have this one where we can go ahead and click add data. I get a prompt. I don't want to go into this welcome administrator. I'm going to skip the tour. And in this case here, I want to monitor, and I load some results. And then I get into the files and directory screen at this section here. Files and directories here. So let's just bring this out a little bit so we can have, once again, a little bit more real estate and see this better. Okay, so in this section here, we have files and directories. We want to click on browse, and we're on step 8 of page 17, and we're looking for the var log. So we have var log, and we're going to click select. That's going to be the source of our files. Then we click next, as it says here in step 9. Then in step 10, it says click review. So we click review, page 17. Let's go submit and review the page, but let's just take a look. Directory monitor, we're looking at the var log source path. NA, automatic search, John is the host name and default. We click submit. And in this case here, to verify that Splunk is able to view the logs, use the command sudo add user test log. So we're going to minimize this and we're going to open a terminal. So we'll just go to activities and open terminal. Let's just see what we have here. And we're going to sudo add user test log, as it says here, and set the password to password 1. Okay, we'll just take all the defaults of this. Is this information correct? We say yes. It looks the same in step 12 to page 18. So we go back to our, I'll just minimize this. We'll go back to our Splunk web interface. And in start sync file input has been created. So for search and reporting under apps, we do search and reporting. We'll let that go in. We're going to skip the tour because this was a fresh install. We're going to enter test log, literally asterisk like this. I'm going to copy it and paste it here. And then we're going to use the magnifying glass to search. And then we have similar search results in this section here. Once again, let me just expand the screen a little bit so we have more real estate to see the data. So we have test log, change user test log. It shows us all the information that we have added the new group. So we're seeing some activity here. Now we're going to switch over to our install the Splunk Universal Forwarder on a Windows 10 device. So this is lab task 3, step 1, page 21. So I'm going to minimize this VM. Go to my virtual manager, and I'm going to bring up the Windows VM. See if we can get that to show up. And here it is here. So let me just get the virtual box out of the way. We are now working with our Windows 10 VM. Let's get that a little bit bigger so we can see. Okay, so first and foremost, it says start your Windows and drag the Splunk Forwarder. I'm going to go ahead and find the Splunk Forwarder in my downloads folder that I downloaded from the Canvas file. I have a Splunk Forwarder here, 8.06. Let me go ahead and copy that over. I can get rid of the downloads folder and make it look like my screen here. It says to double click it. It says it's already been installed on this computer, so we'll go ahead and install it again. So I get the Splunk Universal Forwarder. If I take a look at this, check this box here, we make sure that's selected and we want to customize the options. We click next. In this case here, click next in the certification window. In other words, we don't want a certificate password. We click next. In step 5, make sure the forwarder is installed as a local system and click local system. I click next. In step 6, I want security log enabled. This is fine. And click next. And then I want to create a username, which is going to be Splunk, S-P-L-U-N-K. And the password is going to be Splunk123. Verify that. Verification was fine. It says use the IP address in our Ubuntu machine and write down the IP address. So let me just go ahead and pull up my Ubuntu machine and find out what that is. The IP address of it is in step 8. It says use the command IP address in your Ubuntu machine and write down the IP address. So let's go to our Ubuntu machine and find out what that is. So I have a virtual box here. It's not that one. It's not this one. It is this one. So let's just sign into that one. Okay, so let's go to a terminal and I'll just clear the screen. An IP address. And the IP address that we're looking for is the 10.3/24. So I'm going to go back and just minimize this. And it says put in the IP address, and I know it's the 10.0.0.3. And the port is 8089. And on page 26, number 10, it says enter the same IP address for the receiver index. So we're going to do 10.0.0.3. And this time we're going to use port 9997. I click next. When the configuration ends, click install. I'm going to get a prompt that looks very similar to this MSI install, so I'm going to click yes. Okay, step 12 says click finish when the installation ends. I click finish. I go to page 28. It says in the command line, pick Windows Defender, Windows Firewall. In control panel, I pick that, and it says turn on Windows Firewall. Make sure that the Windows Firewall is on or off. This section here, we want to make sure that it is off. So I'm on step 15, page 29. And in both cases, the Windows Firewall is off and off. And then I go back into my Ubuntu machine. So I can click OK on this because we're fine. I go back to my Ubuntu machine. So let's minimize this to get it out of the way. pfSense is running. And let's bring the Ubuntu machine back on the stage. So in the web interface Ubuntu, let's go into Splunk and let's go into settings. And in settings, we're looking for forwarding and receiving. Let's give it a little time to catch up. And in the receiving data section, we're going to click add new. We're going to be listening on port 997 as it says in step 3 here. So we're at 9997. In settings, we're going to add data. Then we're going to scroll down to step 5. It says click on the forward button. We're going to select the desktop, which is our Windows desktop, and we're going to name this new server class PC1. Then we click next. Then in the next section here where we go to log events, we're going to add all so we can see everything on this device. Then click next. I'm just taking a look at everything to see if the review here looks fine. We click review. Review looks fine. When we go to apps, I'm in step 10, search and reporting. This is great. I get a new search field here. I'm going to look at the Windows event. So let's go ahead and right click on this command. I'm going to copy, put it into the search box, paste my magnifying glass. And I have a bunch of views from the Windows 10 logs. And I'm seeing authentication information. Of course, we logged in as John. I'm seeing the Win event level security. And I get to the end of this page where I can see all of the Windows logs, and I'm also at the end of this lab. I hope you found this useful. See you at the next one.